Welcome to the With Winning in Mind podcast. I'm Heather Sumlin, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Mallory Fuller, who was Miss Texas 2021. I've known Mallory for a long time, since she was about 8 years old. And we talk a lot about her journey. We talk about her time as Miss Texas. We actually talk about her most challenging appearance ever, where she had to hold rattlesnakes of all things. And we talk a little bit about her directive affirmation. For those of you who are our Patreon members, and if you're not yet, I highly recommend that you join, because we do a deep dive into what she actually wrote in her directive affirmation that helped her secure the title of Miss Texas. Let's get started. Welcome, Mallory, to our wonderful show. I'm sorry that Troy isn't able to be here with us, so you're just with me today. Is that all right?
Good. Sounds good to me.
Awesome. Okay, so
More of you.
more of me. You haven't had enough of me over the past, I don't know, since you were 13, maybe?
Yeah, 12, maybe.
Maybe 12?
13.
Oh my goodness. So I have known Mallory Fuller for, actually, I think I met you when you were 8, maybe.
Yes.
And then I started working with you when you were a teen, competing
Right.
for the Miss America organization and the teen program. And so give us a little bit of backstory, who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my name is Mallory, and I started in the Miss Texas organization as a Lone Star Princess. I was a Lone Star Princess to 2 Miss Texas, Shyla Phillips and Molly Hazlett. And that, honestly, from the moment that I stepped foot into the auditorium of Miss Texas 2005, I was absolutely hooked. I loved everything about the Miss Texas organization. I loved the women who competed. They were my role models growing up. A lot of people growing up, they have celebrities that they look up to, or maybe somebody that does a sport that they're interested in. For me, my role models were the women who were competing in the Miss Texas organization. So full circle moment when I was crowned Miss Texas 2021. And it was honestly the best year. Getting to just serve the organization that truly grew me into the woman that I am today was such a blessing.
So talk a little bit about your journey.
Yeah,
What was the difference between, when you first started, what's the difference between Mallory at 12 and 13 and Mallory as Miss Texas?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So when I started in the teen portion of the competition, I was only 13, and I was painfully shy and socially awkward. I could not get a single word out of my mouth when I was on stage. I struggled really hard in the interview room, and I really was not secure in who I was. I was honestly dealing with a lot of insecurities about being tall. I have been 5'11" since I was in the 6th grade. And so feeling all of those insecurities and taking that into competing, I was not confident in who I was, and I was not secure. And that's why I think that I struggled so hard when I competed as a teen. So over, I guess it was 10 years total that I competed for Miss Texas Outstanding Teen into the Miss Texas competition. It's honestly kind of grew into a whole different person. So competing in the Miss portion of the competition, I honestly feel like that's when I really started to love myself, and I really started to believe that I could be Miss Texas one day. So it was really cool to be able to see the progress that was made from being a teen who was painfully shy, who couldn't hardly even function when she was in an interview or when she had to speak on stage, to winning Miss Texas was really cool.
I remember a mock interview that I did with you. Like when you were 13 years old, there was a mock pageant that was put on by a local organization, and I was asked to be a judge, and you came in and could barely get words out. And I knew you already, so I knew you were capable of so much more. So it's so incredibly cool for me to see you accomplish these amazing things. And one of the things that you accomplished, not only did you win Miss Texas, you went on to Miss America. And so give us a little bit of a glimpse into what is that like to compete on the national stage for the opportunity of a lifetime.
I think so. I was extremely nervous for Miss America, but almost in a good way. So all of my years that I competed in Miss Texas, you compete every single year, you get more comfortable. But going to Miss America, nobody can prepare you for that feeling, especially when you have watched it your entire life. You've watched the girls compete on Miss America on TV. So seeing that and going and being like, I'm the one who's doing this now, I'm competing at Miss America, is an overwhelming feeling, and it's kind of surreal. But I tried my very best to be able to just take in the moment and like take a minute to look around and realize that this was actually happening and I was actually competing at Miss America. So it was overwhelming, but also because of my help from Heather, I'm sure we'll talk about this even more, being able to take all of the things that I had learned since I was a 13-year-old competing and apply that to competing at Miss America. I walked away as a preliminary social impact winner, as well as making the top 10. So that was just beyond anything that I could have ever imagined. I look back sometimes and I'm like, wow, I really did that. I really made the top 10 at Miss America. So beyond proud of myself.
Well, let's talk about that social impact pitch situation. So the Miss America organization over the years has made a few changes to the competition. And one of the things that they added was a social impact pitch. So it's maybe a minute, maybe 90 seconds. It's a short speech that you give about your social impact, which is what you advocate for as an individual, not just as a title holder. So give us a little bit of a background on what your social impact is and what preparation for that pitch kind of look like.
Yes. So my social impact is Mallory's mission, suicide prevention, and it started when I was a sophomore in high school. So I experienced the loss of one of my really good friends when I was in high school, and that was something that was so shocking and devastating for us because he was somebody that was always smiling. He was the coach's son. He played football. He was in all of the honors classes. You know, nobody that you would think would be somebody who would struggle with mental health or suicidal thoughts. And so when it happened, it was so shocking for all of us that we just honestly didn't even know what to do. And being from a small town, we did not talk about mental health. We did not talk about suicide, especially. And so when it happened, that's why it was so devastating and shocking for us. So Johnny's parents actually partnered with an organization called the Jason Foundation. And the Jason Foundation created an act called the Jason Flood Act. And what that does is it makes it mandatory for teachers to be trained in suicide prevention annually instead of just once before they can get their teaching certificate. So I actually got to go with Johnny's family and the Jason Foundation to the Texas Capitol and get that passed in Texas. And so I did that when I was 15. And I think when I saw the way that me telling the story of Johnny or being able to advocate for people who are struggling, and I saw that me talking about it and going together with Johnny's family and the Jason Foundation really could make this huge difference, like getting an act passed in Texas. That's when my real passion for it began. And so I've been able to do a lot with my social impact, and I feel like I'm getting a little bit long-winded on this, but since I was 15 and I advocated for the act, I was able to write children's books about mental health. I was able to develop my own college training program. As Miss Texas, I spoke to over 30,000 students on suicide prevention. And so when I went into Miss America, I was so excited to be able to share the work that I had done with my social impact pitch. And I actually worked very closely with Heather on my social impact pitch and being able to share the really important parts to me. I knew that I wanted to talk about Johnny because he was such a huge part in developing this. And I knew that I wanted to talk about the different work that I had done for kids, for high school students, for adults. And so being able to tie all of that in together as one package was really special. And honestly, taking home that social impact award probably means more to me than making the top 10 even really did, because my year as Miss Texas was so heavily marked with suicide prevention, because that really was my job. It was to talk about it, to go into schools, to make a difference about it. And so seeing that being rewarded was so special.
When your number one job as Miss Texas is to speak. And a
Right.
lot of people don't realize that, who maybe they don't follow the Miss America organization. They just see a girl with a crown and a sash and they wonder, well, what does she do? Like, what does she
Right.
just
Yeah.
ride in parades and wave a little bit? And that's not the case. I mean, you do that as well, but you have a lot of different appearances that you do. And you spent a lot of your time in schools, and a lot of middle schools. I feel like you were able to reach that age in which you maybe didn't struggle with suicidal thoughts, but you struggled with fitting in or feeling like you were worthy. Did you find that connected with you or resonated with you on a deeper
Yes.
level, that age group?
In 2020, I actually started to struggle with my own mental health because I lost my grandfather. And so I started struggling with a lot of anxiety and a lot of sadness. And I decided to seek counseling for the first time. And so being able to see on a personal level what it meant to take care of your mental health and how it can impact you as a person, there were so many things in my life that I feel like were turned around because I decided to go to counseling. And so being able to talk about mental health and suicide prevention at Miss America it became even more personal when I decided to go to counseling.
Well, I think a lot of times people don't seek the resources that are available to them, or they don't realize that they need more. And so I appreciate everything that you've been advocating for, because there's a lot of kids that are struggling with things that we can't help them with. We can help them with handling their mental game and having a strong mental process going into competition or following a process. But if it's deeper than that, or there are issues with depression or anxiety or things that are outside of our realm, we really appreciate a good therapist and a good counselor to be able to help in a way in which we can't. And so I'm very grateful that you knew yourself well enough to know what you needed in that moment. And so one of the things I would love for people to know is that, while yes, we can help you with controlling your thoughts, but when it goes deeper, seek additional support, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And one thing I want to know, okay, so let's switch to something a little more maybe fun in a way. I want to know, what does your eyebrows always get me? She does this like thing with her eyebrows all the time and has, forever. Okay, so what was the funnest appearance, and what was the most maybe shocking maybe appearance? So pick one or give both, or it might be the same appearance. I don't know.
Okay, so one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that Miss Texas every year goes to the Rattlesnake Roundup. So the Rattlesnake Roundup happens in Sweetwater, Texas, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It is a rattlesnake roundup. So it's where the Sweetwater JCs will round up all of the rattlesnakes around the community. And really, it's in an effort to control the rattlesnake population and keep animals safe, keep children safe, all of those things. But Miss Texas's role is she gets to go, and not only do you get to hold a rattlesnake, so you're like holding it with your bare hands, like, and it's a rattlesnake. A lot of people ask me that. They were like, did it still have its fangs? Like, did it still have venom? Yes, like it is a live rattlesnake with its fangs, with its venom. If it bites you, it's going to be a really, really bad thing. But the Sweetwater JCs won't let that happen. So not only do you hold a rattlesnake, but you get to be put in a rattlesnake pit. So they put chaps on you, and then they put boots on you, and they tape you up to make sure that your ankles are like closed. And they put you into a pit of rattlesnakes, and you're basically just like picking them up and moving them to be able, so they don't suffocate each other. But you're picking them up and moving them. But what a lot of people don't realize is that when you're in there, there's not a lot of walking room. So you're kind of like shuffling your feet so that you don't step on them. So yeah, that was a little terrifying. Honestly, being able to tell people that I have been put into a pit of rattlesnakes before and nothing scares me, it's kind of cool. But yes, it was terrifying.
I remember you being really terrified of that appearance long before it happened. Yeah. But I think, and maybe that's where you used mental management the most, I feel like. So what did you tell yourself, if you remember, before you got into that pit?
Honestly, I don't remember. It was kind of just like you got to do it. So it's kind of like fight or flight kicks in. And I think that there's honestly a lot of instances as Miss Texas when that happens, because you have to be really adaptable. You have to be okay with things not going your way. You have to be okay with being put on the spot. You may show up to an appearance thinking that you're just there to support, and the person comes up to you and is like, okay, are you ready for your keynote speech? And you're like, okay, yes, I am. So you have to be able to adapt and overcome. And I feel like all year I did use a lot of my mental management strategies of, just trusting that it's all going to be okay, not overthinking it. I realized very early on in competing that it's kind of random because it especially came into play with my talent. If I overthought it, it would go horribly wrong. But if I just trusted that I had practiced and I knew what I was supposed to do and that my subconscious would take over, then it would all be okay.
If you could go back and do anything different, is there anything you would change?
No, I don't think so.
If you could give advice to anyone who's interested in competing, what advice would you give them?
There's like so many things that I could say to that question. I think my number one piece of advice is to just go for it and do it, because even if you don't walk away with the Miss Texas crown, there is still so many things that you learn along the way. I don't think that I would be the same person that I am today if it weren't for the Miss Texas organization. I wouldn't be the same person in my job or in school or in my relationships, anything like that, if it weren't for all of the life skills that I learned throughout my years competing. And so you really do kind of discover who you are. You kind of have to know who you are to be able to be successful in life in general. And so this kind of teaches you how to know who you are, to own who you are, and show the world the best sides of you.
I think competing in pageantry is a journey of self-discovery. No matter what system it is, what the Miss Texas organization does so well is provide opportunities to be able to speak and to go into schools. That is your primary job while you serve as Miss Texas. So let's talk a little bit about what you would do, because you've written 2 children's books, and what led you to write the first one and then kind of segue into the second one, because I'm super curious.
Having a suicide prevention platform, I knew that my subject matter was really heavy, but I wanted a way to be able to relate to kids. I knew from watching previous Miss Texas, from watching my sister Madison be Miss Texas, that a lot of the job in Miss Texas was going into elementary schools. And honestly, I did a lot of elementary schools, but I feel like because of my platform, there were so many more opportunities. There were so many more doors open to be able to go into high schools and share my message as well, that Miss Texas in the past haven't really had. But being able to write Henry's Happy Heart gave me a way to talk to kids about mental health. And it basically goes through a story of Henry and his best friend Ruby, and they are on a journey to become science fair champions. And so Henry has to go through all of these different obstacles, like talking to the nurse when he's feeling sick and talking to the teacher when he has a question on his homework. But then when they get to the third obstacle, Henry has a problem that neither him or Ruby really know how to figure out. He's feeling really sad. He doesn't know why he's feeling really sad. He's feeling anxious about being in the science fair. And Ruby tells him, maybe you should talk to our counselor about that. And so he goes and he talks to the counselor. He works through all of his different emotions that he's having. And then at the end, they become science fair champions. And so when I would take it into schools, I wouldn't take my book because we would be doing assemblies with 700 students in it. But I would have this big cardboard cutout of Henry. And at the beginning of the presentation, his heart was blue. And so I would tell the story of Henry's Happy Heart, but on a larger scale. So we would talk about who would you go see if you were feeling sick? And then I would ask for volunteers. I'd call on somebody. They would say the nurse. They'd come up and they would hold a letter. And so at the end, there were 5 letters. But when we got to the third point, which, as I was saying before, was Henry having to go see the counselor, it was actually really interesting because I would ask them, who would you go see if you were feeling really sad? And oftentimes the first person they said would not be the counselor. They would say, I'd go see a friend, or I would see a parent, or I would see a teacher. All of those things are great things. And I would definitely be sure to highlight that and say, there are so many people that you can talk to if you're feeling sad. But you can also talk to your counselor, and eventually somebody would know the answer to it. And so they'd get to come up and hold the letter. But it was just a fun, interactive way to get them engaged and to learn the really important concepts of asking for help when you need it. It's okay to not be okay. That help is available. There are people who care about you and who love you and who want to make sure that you succeed and you have all the tools that you need to succeed.
How can someone purchase your books if they want them?
So it is available on Amazon, Henry's Happy Heart, as well as Henry Gets Help. So I'll talk about that one a little bit. Henry Gets Help was written in conjunction with a counselor who has her master's degree in counseling. And it was written specifically for those kids who have to go to therapy. So it goes through the process of what play therapy looks like. And I was able to write the bulk of the book, but the therapist was able to give me insight into what play therapy actually looks like. So she would talk about the kind of toys that you play with, what kind of questions the counselor might ask you. And so she was telling me that one of the biggest problems for kids when they are going to counseling is that fear of the unknown. And so when counselors are able to create predictability for kids, it is a really beneficial tool. So Henry Gets Help was written specifically for those kids, and I was able to give it to some counselor offices, also school counselors. And I was really proud of that one as well, because Henry Gets Help, Henry's Happy Heart, sorry, they're too similar in names. Henry's Happy Heart starts that conversation, but Henry Gets Help is a really practical tool that parents and counselors and people can use to be able to help those kids who might need some extra help with their mental health. But they're both available on Amazon.
Very cool. Very cool. So proud of you for writing those books and having them available to help these kids. Mm-hmm. Okay, so tell me, when you look back at our journey, working together and preparing for Miss Texas and Miss America, what were some things that you utilized as far as the tools that you received from mental management that were helpful to you?
So many things. I would say one of the big ones that I used at the beginning of my journey and continued to use was the journal, and being able to write down the things that I did well and being able to look over what I did well when I was getting ready to compete, all of the preparation that I had done, and kind of remind myself like, okay, you're done, you're good. Everything's going to be okay. You did all of this before to prepare. So now it's just time to go and trust that you have already done the preparation. Another thing that really helped me was the webinars. I did the webinar, I think I did it in 2020 when we had our COVID year and Miss Texas got canceled, but then I did it again in 2021 as a refresh. And that kind of, I already knew a lot of information from the webinars, but I feel like it kind of helped recenter me, and it honestly gave me new insight into things that I had already learned, but new insight into those things. And then the last thing that I feel like was probably the most beneficial of all the tools that mental management gave me was the directive affirmation. And so reading over that every single day was huge for my self-image, being able to tell myself every day, I am not only capable, but worthy of being Miss Texas. And I have done X, Y, and Z. And I know that God is taking care of this and that I can trust that He has a plan. And that plan is not only the right plan, but it is the best plan. And it is what is going to ultimately fulfill me the most.
Awesome. Okay. I loved working with you on directive affirmations because you would soak it up, and you did several, not only in preparation for Miss Texas, but then also during your year. as Miss Texas. So when we do our second interview, because we're going to do another interview after this one for our Patreon membership, and we'll do a deep dive into what your directive affirmation may have looked like, if you're willing to share that, because I think that would be really fun, and maybe even some of the things you would journal about. So for those of you who don't know, the Performance Analysis Journal is a specific way of journaling that we teach, and we have journals available on our website. And then the directive affirmation, Lanny, my father, explains in his book With Winning in Mind how to do one, but then we do consultations where we help people be able to actually formulate and write it for themselves, which is really valuable and exciting. And the webinar she's talking about was Mental Mastery for Pageantry webinar series. We do all sorts of webinars for all sorts of different sports or activities, or just for life in general, and those you can find on the website too. I don't have one coming up quite yet, but I will. It's for sure in January. I'm sure I'll do another one. So exciting. Okay, so if you could share, one little nugget of maybe your favorite, I don't know whether it needs to be a piece of advice or like what's a motto that you live by, or something that would be inspirational and encouraging to those who are listening.
One that I feel like is really impacting me right now, and has impacted me throughout my years competing in Miss Texas and being Miss Texas, is that God has a plan. If I could go back and tell 13-year-old Mallory, 14-year-old Mallory, even 15-year-old Mallory, when she was competing all of those years and felt the disappointment of not making the top 5, not walking home as Miss Texas Outstanding Teen when she worked so hard, she felt like she had done her very best. If I could go back and tell her, it's all going to be okay. You're going to be Miss Texas one day. Just trust that God has a plan. I think that she would probably freak out, but trusting that your life is going to happen exactly how it's supposed to happen. And for me right now, that is really heavy on my heart right now, because after my year as Miss Texas, transitioning into life as just Mallory, I was supposed to graduate this past August, which it's still August right now, but this month. And all of my friends graduated from the master's program that I'm currently in. But because I was Miss Texas, I still have another year left of school, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I absolutely understand how blessed I am to have been Miss Texas and to be able to live out my childhood dream. But there's a little part of me that's like, oh, but all of your friends graduated and they got jobs and they're moving on and doing all of these exciting things, and you've been in school forever. And I just have to constantly remind myself that that's okay. Like, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. And God has a plan for every single part of it. And honestly, when I look back in 20 years, I'm not going to be thinking about the fact that I was in school an extra year, but the fact that I got to live out my childhood dream and have all of these experiences going into schools, traveling the state, and even all of the experiences from when I was a teen competing and a Miss competing, and all of the friendships that I made. And if I would have won Miss Texas when I was 19, or if I would have won Miss Texas Outstanding Teen, who knows if I would have gone on to be Miss Texas. And if I would have won Miss Texas when I was 19, I probably would not have had the same kind of experience that I had going to Miss America. And honestly, you have to be mentally tough to make it through the year as Miss Texas. And so I don't know that I would have been able to do it as a 19-year-old. So trusting that God has a plan for your life and that that's the best plan for you.
I think there were a lot of variables that kept you from winning earlier. And one of them was yourself, because I don't think you, I remember conversations where I felt like you didn't really think you could do it yet. Yeah. And then also your sister was competing alongside you, which is difficult when your older sister also has the same dream. And after she won Miss Texas, I feel like you gave yourself permission to go for it.
Well, it's kind of crazy because I remember, when that moment happens, when you win Miss Texas, or you watch your sister who you've competed with for years win Miss Texas, you don't really remember a lot. You kind of black out. But there was a moment when Madison was crowned that I vividly remember thinking, okay, I can do this now. okay, great. She's done. I can do this now. Which, not to take away from Madison winning at all, because I think we can go back and look at pictures and realize that I was beyond thrilled for her. And it was so cool getting to watch my best friend win Miss Texas and live out her childhood dreams. But there was a moment where I was like, okay, it's my time now. And I think, honestly, again, God had a plan. I would not trade it for a single second, because getting to share that bond with Madison, I feel like has made us even closer as sisters. As close as we can be, we're even closer. And we actually got to be roommates that year that she won Miss Texas, and it was the best experience ever. So yeah, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Well, I wouldn't trade our bond or our friendship for the world either. And I've been so blessed to be part of the Fuller family, from your older sister Morgan to Madison to you. And I'm so incredibly grateful for everything that you have blessed me with, just your joy and your insight in life. And your willingness to talk to my daughter every now and again, just randomly, is kind of nice. So I love you, and I'm grateful that you've taken the time to talk to us. I hope that people have taken a little bit of insight from what you've had to share. Go ahead and like this episode if you do. If you are not one of our Patreon members, please join our Patreon membership. We are going to do a deep dive into what Mallory would write in her directive affirmation that helped her to be able to take that crown of Miss Texas.